Okay, thank you, Mark. Well, good morning and welcome to the February meeting of the Environment and Housing Committee. We're still operating remote, and as such I've got a statement that I require to read out. Thank you everyone for attending today's meeting. First, a brief statement on the protocols to be followed during this remote meeting. Please note this meeting is being broadcast live on YouTube and the recording will be made available to the public following the meeting. Can members please mute their microphones throughout the meeting when not speaking? This is important since it helps to ensure the quality of the audio for all present. Your microphone should be switched on when invited to speak and switched off when you have finished speaking. Please use the raise hand button to indicate that you wish to speak at any point. Can I also ask that officers introduce themselves by confirming their name and role before speaking for the first time on any item? If any members lose connection or have any technical issues during the meeting, please alert the clerk as soon as possible, either using the chat function within the meeting or by email or telephone. I'll now ask the clerk to carry out a roll call of elected members participating in today's meeting.
Thank you, Convener. Councillor Errol.
Present.
Councillor Gibson.
Present.
Councillor Houston, we have his apologies. Councillor Hutchison.
She's just having some issues joining, I think, but is on her way.
Okay, thank you. Councillor McPherson.
Yeah.
Councillor Majuri.
Present.
Councillor McGill.
I'm here.
Councillor Thompson.
Present.
And Councillor Tolamash. Councillor Tolamash.
Excuse me, I was on mute.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for that. Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, Michelle. So apologies, we have Councillor Houston. Substitutions, we don't seem to have any, so we'll move on. Declarations of interest. I've none. Nobody coming forward. Okay, thank you. I've no urgent business, so we move on to minutes of the meeting. Two meetings to consider. The Environment and Housing Committee, 18th November, and that's pages 1 to 8. So we'll quickly run through it page by page for corrections. Page 1, page 2, page 3, page 4, page 5, page 6, page 7, and page 8. So we're agreed this is a true record. Okay, thank you. Right, to meeting of 15th December, pages 9 to 12. Start with page 9, page 10, page 11, and page 12. Again, agreed this is a true record. Thank you. We'll move on to item 5, the rolling action log. Who's introducing this? Don't seem to have an officer introducing. Oh, sorry, Brian Roberts.
Thanks, Chair. Brian Roberts, Chief Operating Officer for Infrastructure and Environment. No real introduction required for this one, I don't think, Chair. This is the update on the rolling action log that comes to committee every time. So officers have updated the comments and the actions along with any completed dates for any of those actions that have been completed. So committee are just asked to note it and comment on it.
Okay, thanks. One minor point on the rolling action log. It's a wee bit awkward reading it because the pages are both clockwise and anti-clockwise. Could we ensure? And I know this is the first thing. I think it's the second time it's happened, but we could make sure it all makes sense. Okay, I'll open it up. Right, I've got Councillor Errol and Councillor Tolamash.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. It's we've had this problem at other committees with the way that the things. I think it's external printers that are managing to do that. So it was just I know there's been some correspondence about it, but maybe just an update for the benefit of members and the public on the first one, which is EH149, the A811 petition update, because there is in the comments that it will come. There should be a report to this February meeting. And I understand that the report wasn't ready to come, but there was an update made available. I just wonder if we should update people on that.
Yeah. Bruce, Ricky?
Thanks, Convener. It's Bruce Rickey, Senior Manager for Environment and Place. Yeah, apologies, Councillor Earl, the update should have been included within the action log. Just to provide an update, and I know that this has been sent to local elected members to advise them as well, but officers have appointed a consultancy firm to carry out topographical investigations and provide design layouts which will allow discussions with relevant landowners. The outcome of that survey work and the discussions will be reviewed in the context of a Stirling Council road safety plan, which will be brought forward to a future committee meeting.
Right. Thank you, Bruce. Just when you say to a future committee meeting, from a point of view of this petition and something coming back to that, I'm just keen. I know that there's quite a lot of interest in this in the area. When will it be coming back?
I would suggest probably after May, Councillor Earl. It would be the next sort of scheduled committee meeting that we have. We would look to bring back the road safety plan, and that would obviously include the discussions and issues surrounding the A811 junction as well.
Okay, so it's just a bit. I just think, just for the point of view of the record, that it would be back to the next scheduled Environment and House Committee meeting after May.
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you. Brilliant. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Tolmach?
Okay, thank you. It's just get the right one. EH173. Trying to make sense of this. It does say in the column immediately opposite that a confirmation the report will be taken at EH Committee February 2022, but that might have been superseded by something else. So I just wanted to see actually where we are with this. It's speeding limit, or speed limit.
Over to you again, Bruce.
Thanks, Convener. Yes, thanks, Councillor Tolomash. Just to say that in terms of the speed limit policy, obviously that has previously been approved by the Environment and Housing Committee. In terms of the issues surrounding speed cameras, that will be encapsulated within the Stirling Council Road Safety Plan. As I mentioned there to Councillor Earl, that will come forward to the next scheduled committee meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Martin, you've still got your hand up? Okay. Right, I've no further hands up, so are we happy to move on to the next item? Okay, thank you. Item 6, Performance and Strategic Priorities Progress Report, pages 33 onwards.
Excuse me, can I just say that Councillor Hutchison has now joined the meeting, just so that you're aware.
Oh, lovely, thank you.
Thanks, Michelle.
Okay, right, okay. If I could ask the officer to introduce the paper, please.
That's myself again, Convener. Brian Roberts, Chief Operating Officer for Infrastructure and Environment. So this paper provides a committee with an update on the strategic priorities and performance aspects that sit within the remit of the committee, and the layout is as per the previous papers to committee, with the appendices providing details on the performance and the explanations for those that are of performance, and officers are on the call for those particular areas to answer any questions. The paper also notes that the local government benchmarking framework indicators for the last financial year will be released in end of February, end of this month. So obviously that information will be shared with elected members, obviously once it's collated and received.
Okay, thank you, Brian. Open for questions, Councillor Tolmach. Oh, your hand is up.
Yeah, he did go up. So that was supposed to be there. Okay,
Councillor Tolmach, then Councillor McGill.
Thank you, Chair. try to see. I'm sorry, I'm struggling to see the page. I think it's page 38. It is. I just wanted to ask a question about, okay, recycling rates. But, Chair, before that, I would like to say that despite, okay, the COVID, it's really good to see that the routes completed was 98% in December, because I know this, okay, the service had the difficulties with staff being off with the COVID. So I wanted to say, okay, thank you for to the staff for that, if I may. But so the actual question is that we have introduced now a 4 weekly collection. This has been going, I believe, since September. That's correct. And one of the objectives of this introduction of 4 week collection was to increase, okay, our recycling rates. But if you actually look at the last December 21, our recycling rates are 49%. So could you please say a reason why this is, and if we are on trend to increase the recycling rates?
Bruce.
As convener, thank you, Councillor Thomas, for the question. And I'll certainly pass on your thanks to the team down at Waste in terms of the route completion as well. Thank you for that. In terms of the drop in terms of the recycling rate in December, that's a natural trend that we usually have due to reductions, obviously, in terms of garden waste, but also the fact that obviously we take out one brown bin collection during that December period as well. That obviously helps us service obviously grey, blue and green bins during that period. In terms of the data that we've actually got for the introduction of the 4 weekly collection service, what it shows is that we are seeing a reduction of around about 200 tonnes per month in terms of general waste, which is very encouraging. And also as well that we have seen an upturn in the amount of glass that we're currently collecting at this point in time. What we've done is we've done that comparison against 2019 figures. Obviously, comparison in terms of 2020 was very difficult because of obviously COVID. Some of our numbers were out during that period. But if you take it as a comparison with 2019, certainly residual waste arisings are down. And obviously, we're seeing that increase in terms of particularly glass recycling at this point in time.
Okay, thank you for that. Another quick question, which is related to this, Chair, is when you go to collect bins and the bins are either overflowing or there are black bags next to the bins, what's the policy of the council?
The policy is, Councillor Thomas, obviously if a bin lid is significantly up, what you might call in terms of a crocodile lid, the crews are advised not to lift, and obviously there is a no side waste policy as well, particularly against bins, whether that be grey or recycling bins as well.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Bruce, can I pick up on the conversation there? Are you suggesting that maybe there was a lot of glass was going into the grey bin previously that's now going into the smaller box? Because you're right, the trend is down. The blue bin is roughly the same, the green, but it's the glass. You're right, there's an uptake.
Yeah, certainly that seems to be the main driver at the moment, is that certainly there has certainly been more glass being collected. In terms of some months, Councillor Thompson, we're seeing about 60 tonnes additional glass actually coming through, which is encouraging that's obviously coming out of the system.
Okay, thank you. Right, so we've got Councillor McGill, then Councillor Earl.
Thanks, convener. I just wanted to talk about the rent arrears, and I noticed there's been an increase lately, but the narrative on page 43, you give more detail, and it's really very significant, the increase, and it would appear here it's due to the rollout of universal credit. And obviously there's been attempts to resolve this, but I'm just wondering how much additional officer time is used supporting people in the way it's described in the narrative.
Stephen Clark.
Thanks for your question, Councillor McGill. Yeah, we have a number of income maximisation officers that work for the service to support people in terms of claiming universal credit, and also to provide support to them in case they end up in financial difficulties. There is the relatively recently announced tenant grant scheme, which supports households that have fallen into arrears during the COVID-19 period, and we're supporting households who may be eligible for that as well, which will obviously support them and also help reduce our level of arrears. Our level of arrears are high, although it must be said across the country there has been really significant spikes, and it hasn't actually been a significant increase in Stirling as it has been in many other parts of the country.
Thank you. I just wonder how much extra manpower, resources, how much money is it costing to put all that support in place? Because I mean, by my calculations, and I'm not the best mathematician in the world, but the numbers you've got here, it would be an additional £352,815 between June 17 and December 21, which is a very significant increase. And if you're having to put additional manpower in, or women power, whatever, to support this, how much is it costing the taxpayer to support this policy?
It's a difficult one for me to answer in terms of how much it's costing the taxpayer to support. We haven't increased our income maximisation officers during the last 12 months. Prior to that, I'm not so sure. I'd have to come back to you with a response in terms of increased level of staffing for the service. But it's certainly a concern with the expected increases in fuel costs, that could also have an impact on our arrears as well, with more households being more at risk of accruing further debt.
Okay, thank you. I look forward to hearing more about that. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor McGill. Certainly that's something that came up at the Housing Advisory Group, the impact on the fuel cost, etc. So it's something we need to look at. Councillor Earl and Councillor Hutchison.
Thanks, convener. It'd be for Bruce initially, then I've got a housing one. Just going back to Councillor Tolomash's point, where Bruce, you talked about the 200 tonnes less being created, or that's the indications at the moment. I just want to be clear what we're talking about here. Is that all waste, or is that's landfill waste, and that's waste generated through the domestic collection of bins and presented to recycling centres, or just the bins? I'm not clear.
Certainly, Councillor Earl, the data that we've got, and obviously happy to share this with members as well, it relates to, I'm just double checking here so I can give you the right information. It's household waste and recycling, excluding recycling centres. So that is domestic waste that's collected at the curbside.
Right. So but landfill waste or all waste.
So that's a reduction in terms of landfill waste that we're seeing at this point in time.
Right. So we're seeing a reduction in landfill waste being collected, but we don't have the figures from the recycling centres to see the overall amount of landfill waste being generated. This is just from the curbside at the moment.
That's the curbside figure in terms of the reduction, and certainly in terms of the figures for the HWRCs, certainly that's something that we can provide as well, Councillor Earl.
Right, yeah, I think to see it in the round, Bruce, we need to, if there's 200 tonnes being, if that's the figure at the moment, if that's being, less of that is being collected, it's either going somewhere else, or it's not being generated in the first place. That's the, and we need to see it across the piece to understand what is happening there. Thank you. Sorry, the next one is Well, I suppose it covers page 42 and 44, which is percentage of rent loss through properties being empty and average time taken to relet properties. Now, I know I've had some discussions along with other local members for certain areas of our ward, and I imagine other members have as well. But what I would be helpful is where we're talking about the process that's in place and the inspections that happen prior to a tenant leaving the tenancy. I wonder, Stephen, if you could just talk us through what happens there from a point of view of what obligations are placed on a tenant moving on from a property regarding the state that the property is left in.
Stephen?
Yep, Stephen Clark, Chief Officer for Housing. My colleague Gillian Finley's on the call and may be better placed to answer this question. Suffice to say that we do have a pre-termination officer, and it is not always possible to access properties when they come up for termination. But my colleague Gillian Finley might be able to provide a bit more information in terms of the process.
Hi, Chair, Gillian Finley, Service Manager acting. Yeah, in terms of what Stephen has just said, we do have a pre-termination officer that in normal times obviously would visit the property and go through the with tenants what they would expect the property to be handed back in condition. I think a part of the issues that we see is, you know, we have a bit of leeway when it's transfer tenancies, but obviously in terms of people ending tenancies, the conditions sometimes that they come back in, you know, there's little we can do apart from advise tenants, you know, it would be tenant to repays, and, you know, there would be debt associated with leaving houses in those conditions. But in terms of transfer tenants, we do carry out visits and we would go through what is expected of the properties in terms of handing them back to the council. But obviously, COVID has impacted our ability over the last year and a half to do a lot of visits in person. So, you know, often it has been advice over the phone in the past, but it is a process we do go through with tenants.
And we are back to doing in-person inspection visits now, I assume. Yeah.
Where possible, we are. Yeah, but there is still some, you know, that we aren't able to due to obviously people self-isolating or we've had, you know, the staff shortages, but in the main we are carrying them out in person when we can.
Right, thank you. And can I just, on that point, where there are people in different types of tenancies, whether it's homeless or mainstream, and they're transfer or they've left or what have you, something that came out in the discussions we were having with areas in the ward was what's the different back office teams that are involved in this? Because I've come across a couple of cases where there may have been a disconnect between those back office teams from a point of view of making people available, aware in the right team what's happening from a point of view of their knowledge of the tenant moving on, and that's caused, in some cases, that's caused a lack of understanding about what repairs are needed and how quickly they're going to be done.
Councillor, I'll come back in on that. Gillian Finley, Acting Service Manager. In terms of an end in tenancy, if someone gives us a 28 days notice, obviously we have a signed form that goes into our allocations team and it's logged in the system. That would generate a pre-termination visit with the pre-termination officer, and that's where information is passed on. If we need technical support, as in we're concerned about the property, we would liaise with the operations side in terms of a technical officer visit if required. So in that time, it comes straight in, it goes to our allocations team and they put it through the system with the 28 days notice. But you have to often remember, we don't always get 28 days notice either, you know, with people just handing in keys and no notice. Obviously we've got the issue with the winter and the impact, the number of deaths that come through also, so but it's a standard 28-day process. is
Okay, I think what I was looking for was the thank you for that. I was looking for the sort of reassurance that the back office processing of how this is managed is there's confidence in that, and that is not in any way that doesn't create opportunities for delay where there shouldn't be any.
No, that 28-day is quite controlled. As I say, it's on the system straight away, and you know, it's monitored by our housing services coordinator.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for that.
Thank you. Councillor Hutchison.
Thanks, Chair. This is a question for Bruce. Just going back to the point which Councillor Tollemache made about the bins which are overfilled, and you said they were not being emptied. And just in the context of, I'm getting so much mail from people in my ward who are suffering from fly tipping. And I know that, you know, capacity is something which is affecting that, or at least we suspect it is. Couldn't we just empty the bins that are a bit full and spare them being emptied elsewhere where they're not supposed to be? Because if someone has generated a lot of rubbish and then they're not getting it lifted for another month, what, you know, they're not necessarily going to take it to the dump, much as we would like them to. And their intention might be good, putting it out. Just with so much fly tipping going on, particularly in my ward, I think that's a concern.
Councillor Hutchison, I think in terms of the crews, I mean, I think it's blatantly being overfilled, or that there's, you know, excessive amounts of side waste. Obviously, the crews are instructed, and it's the policy that we don't uplift. If we're aware of particular circumstances whereby there has been fly tipping, and obviously we'd be keen to hear about that and obviously report that through the correct channels, we could obviously have that discussion about what needs to happen in terms of those householders. As I say, that the majority of householders within the Stirling Council area have adapted and adopted the new service very well. We're receiving sort of completion rates in terms of routes of about 95%. If there are particular issues, I'm more than happy to have a discussion about those with you.
But the thing is that people are phoning up and reporting fly tipping, and then they're being told that if it's on private land, so a field, a farmer's field or something like that, the council won't have anything to do with it.
No, that's absolutely correct. We have a duty to deal with fly tipping if it's on council-owned land. Obviously, you know, fly tipping is an absolute scourge that affects not only council-owned land, obviously it affects private landowners as well. But private landowners have that responsibility if the material is dumped on their land.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Thanks, Bruce. I've got no other hands up. Okay, we're asked just to comment on the issues. We've done that, so can I thank you for that? Move on to the next item, community safety. Item 7. Drew, you're going to present this?
Yeah, Councillor Thompson, Drew Leslie, Senior Manager for Infrastructure. The paper is a standing paper on community safety. And Linda Hill and Dan Hartles are here to take questions on that paper. Many thanks.
Yeah, it is a standing paper. Councillor Majuri.
Thank you. Yes, my internet connection's not as good as it would be, so I'll keep the camera off. But just page 57, the antisocial behaviour caseload, obviously that's by period. From it, and we've got the year to date opened. It's been 413, but the case is still active as being 103. So does that mean around 300 have been closed year to date, or just what's the reason for that difference? Because obviously only 77 have been closed within the period, but obviously at bottom figures year to date.
Councillor Thompson, I think Dan.
Sorry, Dan, my computer froze for a second. Dan Hartles is.
Good morning, councillors. Dan Hartle's team leader for community safety. Yes, Councillor Majuri, in essence, that's correct. 300 cases, just over, have been closed this financial year. It's a challenge when we report the figures like this, just in terms of the period. But what I'm trying to do there with that figure is give a committee a sense of how many cases we've dealt with year to date. So yes, your assumption there is correct. It's just over 300 closed this year so far.
Yeah, thank you. No, I think it's important to show, well, hopefully that's closed with success, but yeah, I think it's important to show the hard work you're doing from that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor McGill, then Councillor Earl.
Thank you. Just two questions. One, I noticed that you have 15 cases gone under mediation for antisocial behaviour, and I just wondered how do you measure how successful that mediation is, and how long would a mediation process be, I suppose? That's my first question.
Thanks, Councillor McGill. In terms of timescale, it's a difficult one to quantify. The mediation process can last for one meeting, it can last for several meetings. How we measure the success there is we put what's called a mediation agreement in place, and then that's monitored normally within a couple of weeks, then at 3 months, and then at 6 months. So what we're looking for there is a sustainable outcome, which is how we we monitor the success of that. In terms of the timescale, again, some of them can take one meeting to be to come up with an agreement. Some can take several meetings.
Okay, thanks. And my other question was about the fixed penalty notices, and I just wondered how is there a difference with this? I can't remember what it's called. The app that you can use. Have you found an improvement in that situation or not?
Is that fixed penalty notices for fly tipping? Sorry, just clarify.
Sorry, parking. Sorry.
Yes,
you know the wee app that you can use. You just
in relation. Yeah, the Ringo, so the parking solution. We haven't really seen an impact from using Ringo in terms of the amount of penalty charge notices issued for parking. Just on Ringo, the uptake for Ringo has exceeded our initial expectations. So we're looking at around about 34% of all parking being booked via Ringo at the moment. So a lot of people are approaching the officers and saying that they are finding it easier now to get that parking. So we've not seen a massive drop in figures as yet. I would expect to see some movement in figures over the coming months, possibly.
And is the Ringo available throughout the area, or is it just in the town centre?
Ringo's available across all of our parking, on and off street parking, with the exception of Well Green multi-storey car park at the moment, but we are looking to introduce it there moving forwards.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks, Stan. Okay, so Earl and Councillor Tolomach.
Thanks, convener. Two questions. One, taking on point 2.2 on page 51 at the bottom, the recruitment attempts that are going on. I know that's challenging at the moment, but my broader question to that is we are shortly going to be heading into what will be another busy visitor season across the rural areas. There are new clearways and parking areas that have been introduced and are being introduced ready for the start of that season, which is adding to the existing requirements in those areas. I'm really looking for a commitment that we're going to get the deployments we need to make these parking restrictions effective, because it concerns me that we're just going to hit the start of the season and we're not going to have the right numbers available, especially if some of them are being pulled into the city centre.
Do you have a response to that, Drew?
Yeah, Drew Leslie, Senior Manager for Infrastructure. I'll take the first bit and I'll maybe ask Dan to come back in on the deployment. On recruitment, it's a broader challenge across the service area at the moment. We are seeking more support from HR around recruiting enforcement officers and making sure that we've got the full complement. So it is an ongoing process. We're down a few at the moment, but we're working hard to ensure that we get the right people in. I'll ask Dan to talk a bit more about deployment and the tactical approach that he's taken.
Thanks, Drew. Thanks, Councillor Earl, for the question. Dan Hartles, Community Safety Team Leader. So work has already commenced with partners around planning for the upcoming season. We are also in regular contact with roads colleagues around the additional orders that are coming in. And I'm doing a piece of work at the moment to look at that resource demand. And yes, we will continue to deploy as far as resource allows across the rural zones as we move into that. I'm also mindful that we do have other commitments around the city centre and things like that. But yes, we are looking at it at the moment. We're using a lot of data from last year where we know the hotspots were. But yes, we are already engaged in those conversations with partners around it.
Thank you. And I suppose a follow-up to that, which is probably back to Drew, is should you get to be able to attain full complement for the officers as you wish, and I know that's a challenge, but are we going to get a conversation about whether even at full strength that's enough for these duties that the officers and the service are required to cover? So it may be hard to recruit, but should we be trying to recruit 10 more instead of 2 more is my point. Where's the seat? Where do we think we need to be, and how are we going to have that honest conversation about where the level of service personnel should be as opposed to where it is?
Yeah, Councillor Earl, thanks. The one point I was going to make is that through COVID monies, we felt the service have been offered or given 2 more FTE to support the enforcement team during the recovery, and we're looking around some of the environmental issues that were raised in under the performance and priorities report. I think what I would say is that we were at full complement or virtually full complement for periods last year, and I think things were going pretty well. The issues that were raised to the service were limited, and the approach to deployment was quite strong. I don't think we would ever stop looking at the problems that are occurring, particularly in the rural areas through the summer. And there were certainly areas that we had, I know Dan had to take extra steps and put extra resources towards. So, but for a team, I think we'd be happy to have the ongoing conversation about the problem areas and the challenges that perhaps members are getting direct approaches from the communities around. So I don't think it's ever a point that we would stop looking at it.
Yeah, I suppose my sort of comment back to that, Drew, is that for a lot of the areas that I'm aware of, there just wasn't enough boots on the ground often enough. Just wasn't, from my point of view. So I think I would welcome an honest conversation that we can all have collectively about if we think we need more people to get people out. I mean, one of the areas that's going to be introduced this year is a South-Loch Tay Road on the way to Adjournment. Now, we're going to have people patrolling that road to turn the restrictions that are going to be put in place into a meaningful reality for people up there. They're going to have to get tickets issued to make it relevant to them. How are we going to get people up there often enough to make that worthwhile, to make that a reality? I don't expect you to answer it now.
Yeah.
But that's the kind of question that we need to be having, because if we need more people, we need more people.
Yeah, quite happy Councillor Earl, that we do talk about these individual areas in advance of the summer season, and Linda and Dan and I will be happy to do that. Thanks.
Okay, all right, thank you. I think that's one we can progress. Thanks for that. My other question is on page 52, 2.3 to 2.3, about the antisocial behaviour policy work which is going on. I know with the ad hoc group, and I know there's been a public sort of reach out and survey on this, which is welcome. I suppose my question is, how will the findings from what that survey obtains affect any policy changes that we're looking to make on this? And are the questions that are being asked in that survey relevant to areas where changes can be made that are under the control of the local authority to make changes, rather than areas where we have no capacity or flexibility to make changes at all due to national and statutory requirements?
Drew?
Yeah, Councillor Earl, thanks for that. I'll take the first bit on the policy. I think the service have recognised the need for the policy to be reviewed for some time. We've taken a decision that with the ad hoc scrutiny panel progressing, and there's a report coming to council in March, that we would take a pause on the policy. Some of the information that will come through the consultation will need to be reviewed. There's another meeting tomorrow. I think it is the final meeting with HAG as well. So at that point, I think we'll be coming back to review what is in the policy. I'll maybe get Dan to talk about a little bit more about areas that we're going to look at. But at that point, I think it'll be the autumn time when we come back with the policy. There's an undertaking that we'll come back out to all members with a draft of the policy to seek further feedback from them as well. I'll maybe bring Dan in just now if there's any further points that you would want to make at this stage. Dan?
Thanks, Drew. Thanks, Councillor Earl. Really, just to reiterate what Drew said there, we do still have opportunities to incorporate feedback from this survey and additional surveys that will take place throughout the year as we start work on our antisocial behaviour strategy. In addition to that, we will still have the opportunity to build in comments and views from members as well as part of that ongoing briefing. So the short answer is yes, there's still an opportunity to do that. In relation to the second part of the question there, yes, some of the areas that we're asking about are within our control to implement. Some of them are outside of our control, but we still have opportunities to try and influence policy there through some of the national groups that we participate in.
All right, thank you. I just think it's important for people's information and awareness of what a local authority can do and what it can't, and what it can't do, why it can't do it, and where that decision making resides. I think is very useful, because a huge number of people I come across with dealing with antisocial behaviour things do not. Why should they be aware of where the line stops? To be honest with you, in what local authorities can do.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Tolmach.
Thank you. On the fly tipping 94, this is page 58, 94 out of 94, but we've had no prosecutions. Now, the question I have is it no prosecutions because we haven't got a case to offer? Is it because we don't have the staff to investigate? Because we all agree that a deterrent, and I accept Councillor the Hutchinson's comment, this doesn't unfortunately apply to private ground. But for that which the council has a responsibility, if we are not seeing any prosecutions, if we're not seeing any court cases, what is the deterrent to stop people doing this? So my question is, what is our action as far as prosecution is concerned?
Dan?
Thanks, Chair. Dan Hartles again, Community Safety Team Leader. Thanks, Councillor Tymo. The short answer is we don't currently have any cases that are eligible to be presented as yet. The second part of your answer is the process is slightly different in relation to a fly tipping fixed penalty notice, where it's a matter that the fiscal makes a decision on. The council doesn't have the ability to refer that straight to court stage. We are meeting with the Deputy Fiscal over the next coming month or so in order to just reaffirm that position around fly tipping and try and make some progress in terms of cases we could possibly take forward. But again, it is the Fiscal's decision, it's the Crown Office decision to progress those, and they are applying quite a strong test across Scotland at the moment in terms of the public interest test that needs to be applied. So we're not the only local authority who isn't necessarily seeing much progress with this at the moment, but the work is ongoing with colleagues in the Fiscal Service to try and progress that.
Okay, thank you for that. Chair, I think I may have had another question, but I had a question. Okay, have I already had a question here yet? I don't get it.
Oh, carry on, it's okay.
Okay, the question is on the dog warden uptake, and it's to do with, okay, the animal welfare checks. We all know that there's been a case in the press of a cat being maltreated. So my question is, when we have the animal welfare checks, does this include cats? Because this is a dog warden's report. So what is the responsibility of the council towards cats?
Linda, I'll ask Linda Hill to respond to that one. Thanks.
Good morning, Linda Hill, Regulator Services Manager, Acting. Councillor, the dog warden service will focus on the welfare of dogs. We do not focus on the welfare of cats. If there was an issue of maltreatment against a cat, that would be referred to the SSPCA, Councillor.
Okay, but we do have a process, do we, that we can communicate with them if it comes to our attention. So do you think the public know what to do in this case, and is there a possibility that we could do some the publicity to let people know where they go? Because I think there may be a confusion potentially with the public.
Thank you, Councillor. Absolutely. I think that we have a very strong relationship locally with the SSPCA. We work with them in multiple animal welfare cases of the animals that are within our remit. This includes dogs, farmed animals, horses. In relation to animals that we would not cover, there is protocols in place with the contact centre. Should a member of the public contact Stirling Council to ask, they would be directed to the SSPCA. But I think you're right, Councillor, there is always more we can do, and I'd be happy to take that forward.
Okay, thank you very much, Linda. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Tolomai. Thanks, Linda. Can I come back to the fly tipping, because maybe you're aware, maybe not, that Scottish Government is consulting on fly tipping at the minute. You can go online and make comment, but it is a very complex issue with various agencies involved. But and again, coming back to some of the comments that were made before, and I think page 59 sums it up, that we're putting people onto the streets and they're being verbally abused, aggression, etc. These guys are doing a very tough job. And I'm not surprised that there's a turnover of staff. And I know we give protective gear, etc., but we've got to recognise that we are asking these guys to do jobs we probably wouldn't do ourselves. Councillor McPherson?
Chair, just a very quick point. Councillor Thomas, we made a good point about cats. I love cats as well, and I have had issues in the past in my ward, and we do have a very proactive cats protection. We used to call it Cats Protection League, but that's not the name of it now. But in Forth Valley does have a very, very good, and I've got one or two people in Bamber who are very active in that, and anytime there's issues with lost cats, they've got scanners and such like. So I know you're dealing with the cruelty side rather than the lost side, but Cats Protection are very, very good as well, I've found.
Yeah, agreed. Okay, thank you. Right, no other comments. We can move on to the next paper. Housing revenue account. Stephen?
Yeah, I'll speak to this, Chair. Thank you. This report provides an update on the current income and expenditure relating to the housing revenue account. Section 2.3 of the report notes that we're projecting higher costs for repairs and maintenance, which are mainly due to how we're accounting for staff costs during this financial year. Section 2.14 shows how much we're borrowing this year. The main reason for the high level of borrowing is that we're undertaking a significant number of new build developments and second-hand purchases this year. Appendix 1 shows our income and expenditure, and Appendix 2 shows our spending on the capital programme. I'm happy to, in terms of recommendations then, expenditure in the housing revenue account for 21-22 is projected to be just under £23 million. The year-end retained balance is projected to remain at £986,000. Expenditure on the housing revenue programme is projected to be £25.910 million, and the borrowing requirement for 21-22 is projected to be £14.394 million. Happy to take questions. My colleague Gillian Mackenzie is also on the call.
Okay, thank you. No hands up. Councillor McGill and Councillor Earl.
Yeah, hi, thank you. I just wanted to ask, 2.17, you're talking about the smoke detectors, the fire alarm detectors that the government has changed the expectation round about there, and you're saying that it should expected to be completed before February. Just wondering if that's on track, and I just wondered how much it costs per property. I don't know, you maybe don't have that information.
Thanks for the question, Councillor McGill. It costs approximately £400 per property to fit interlinked smoke alarms in terms of the cost of the alarms and the staff time taken to fit these alarms. Unfortunately, we have not completed all properties as yet. My colleague Stephen Swan's on the call, able to give us an exact number. My understanding is we're at about 82% compliance. Stephen Swan, could you maybe confirm that, please?
Yes, thank you, Stephen. Stephen Swan, Service Manager of Housing, Property and Asset Management. At the moment, we're 88.3% on target for all properties to have the full LED2 interlinked alarm systems installed. In terms of slippage, that's been down to both supply materials and availability of resources. We've had some retention and recruitment issues within the team, and that extends to external contractors that we've been using as well. In terms of the number of installs, we're still to complete that number equates to 690 properties still to receive the full interlink system, albeit those properties still have a wired or a battery operated smoke alarm at present. In terms of completing it, we're targeting ourselves to the 31st of March this year, which is just slightly outside, obviously, the compliance date that the Scottish Government had put in place. Thank you.
Okay, and I don't know any facts about this, but I've just heard people talking that if anything was to happen in the house and this wasn't completed, it might affect their house insurance. So just wondered what stance we can take on that for these houses that are not going to be completed in time.
In terms of my own knowledge, I did read an article that I think Liverpool Victoria is one of the largest home contents insurers, and they had mentioned that as long as people have a form of smoke detection within their property. So I don't think they're going to be penalised if they do not have the full interlinked system. However, that was just me reading a newspaper article. Obviously, it needs to be bottomed out if that is actually factual. But in terms of the properties, the 690 that we're still to do, they do have a level of smoke detection within their property.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Earl.
Thanks, Jim. Just a point on that. I contacted my home insurance policy, and it took a couple of bats backward and forward to get a clear response. But they then came back and said, "Yeah, no, you will not be compromised under the existing policy." Exactly. So if people want to do that, they should contact their policy advisor and just maybe not take the first answer they get because it will be opaque and vague. and just push back, and then you'll get some clarity on it. But everybody seems to be not saying that they will compromise their policies through it. Two questions. Page 62, 2.2. Supervision and management costs are projected to be 75k over budget, mainly relates to additional community safety team support. I suppose I'd like to get a bit of an understanding what that entailed.
Yeah, I'm happy to answer your question, Councillor Earl. That relates to additional staffing support that the HRA is providing to the Community Safety Service, which reflects the fact that the majority of inquiries and complaints in relation to antisocial behaviour that is dealt with by the community safety team relates to council tenants. So we've already provided financial support to support 1 post in that service, so we've upped that to now support 3 posts in that service in order that they can provide a more responsive service to council tenants being affected by antisocial behaviour.
Right, so those officers are under the HRA, but working with the community safety team, but they are, if you like, a resource that concentrates on council tenants. Would that be right?
That's correct.
And it's not a recharge situation. You're just providing that to bolster.
Yes, it's a charge that we'll pay annually to the service in order to provide that continuous support.
Okay, thank you. And then the next one's on page 63 at the bottom, loan debt 2.21, which thank you for laying that out. That's always clearly laid out. I can't remember for quite some time having any kind of briefing or report to committee about the overall business plan, the 30-year business plan. And I just wonder, because I look at this and I see the borrowing requirement going up and everything, but I understand within the context of the asset we hold and the borrowing capacity we have, it's actually very manageable within the context of the plan. But I wonder if it might be useful to have a wider briefing about the overall business plan.
Yes, we'd be happy to provide that. We're actually going to work with the external consultants or experts in terms of HRA expenditure and borrowing during this calendar year, in order that can inform future planning for future financial year, so we can bring something back to members in relation to business planning, because it's something we'll have to do longer term in order to consider that the level of future borrowing we can undertake for things like new build housing and further energy efficiency measures. So yes, we can provide more information once we've worked with external consultants on assessing loan borrowing levels and limits and so on.
Yeah, I think it'd be helpful for the general information levels and awareness of all elected members to have that. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Hutchison.
Thank you. My question refers to point 2.14 about waste. Proposed that developer contributions will be sought for non-recycling waste receptacles. And I'm wondering, are these receptacles just normal waste bins, or are they larger? And will the council be responsible for emptying them?
Sorry, could you, Councillor Hutchison, could you just say again what point of the report is? Sorry,
2.14, the one about waste.
I think that must be a different report you're referring to. That this report relates to prudential borrowing at 2.14.
Oh,
page 63.
Sorry, I'm ahead of myself. Apologies, everyone.
You can get in first next time. Thank you. Okay. No other points. I mean, this paper was well discussed at the Housing Advisory Group, and a few pertinent questions were asked there. So we're asked to note the report. Are we agreed? Okay, thank you. Right, we're on to item 9, supplementary guidance on developer contribution. I see the paper was written by Mark, quite a detailed paper. Mark, is it yourself going to introduce it?
Yes, thank you, Chair.
Okay.
Good morning, everyone. It's Mark Laird, Development Planning Team Leader. Pleased to be bringing forward the revised draft supplementary guidance on developer contributions, which has been a wee while in coming. The report before you presents recommendations to approve for a consultation, the revised draft document in Appendix 1 and accompanying background report in Appendix 2. The consultation will run for a minimum of 12 weeks, following which a finalised document will be brought back to a future committee to approve for adoption, subject to Scottish Minister's ratification. The third and final recommendation is to approve the responses to comments received on the current draft supplementary guidance, which was published in February 2019. The comments were received following the previous consultation exercise carried out between February and May 2019 and have been taken into account in the preparation of the revised document. And those comments and responses are listed in Appendix 3. There are a couple of minor amendments that I would like the committee to note and to take into account alongside the recommendations presented in the paper, and I'll cover those at the end. But just before that, just to give an overview, the revised draft supplementary guidance sets out the detailed requirements for planning obligations and contributions in relation to education, healthcare, transport and access, open space, waste and affordable housing. The scope of the document is directly related to the relevant policy provisions set out within the local development plan. The main changes between the current draft supplementary guidance and the revised version before you today mainly relate to education and healthcare infrastructure requirements and costs. And a summary of the changes is set out in section 2 of the report. To assist further, a comparison of the education costs between the current and revised documents is set out in Appendix 4. Finally, just turning back to the amendments mentioned previously, there are two that require to be made prior to publication of the documents. The first is to remove reference to the Millen Park Road site allocation from Table 2A of the revised guidance document. So that's page 19 of the SG or page 99 of the agenda paper. And this is pure just to correct a drafting error. So for clarification, it is only South Stirling Gateway that is required to contribute to the cost of mitigation identified within the school catchment, as stated in the footnote on the same page. It's footnote 8. This approach is consistent with that taken as part of the current supplementary guidance and also consistent with the Section 75 process for South Stirling Gateway, which is being advanced in parallel with the production of the revised guidance. The second and final amendment is to include the methodology for calculating transport trip rates in the developer contributions background report. So this would simply involve bringing into the background report the methodology that is set out in paragraph 3.9 of the current draft supplementary guidance. So that's the information already published in the February 2019 version rather than the revised version before you. So just to recap on those changes, the first is to remove the reference to Millen Park Road from Table 2A of the revised draft, and the second is to include the methodology for calculating transport trip rates within the background report. Importantly, neither of these changes depart from the current draft supplementary guidance. So that concludes the introduction. Happy to take any questions. And just to say on that final point, that Isabel Smith, the Forward Planning Officer in Education, is also here to take any questions that might come up in relation to operational matters for education. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. Councillor Hutchison, it's this paper you're referring to, so I'll let you go first.
Thanks, Jim. Yeah, so it was just on the waste provision. The 2.14 mentions contributions being sought for non-recycling waste receptacles, and I'm wondering if these are just waste bins or they're larger receptacles, similar to what we see on the continent of Europe. And will the council be responsible for emptying them?
Yes, just to clarify, there are sort of two contribution requirements on this. The first is just for household waste receptacles, and the other for developments of certain scales. So for major housing developments, there's a requirement to contribute to bring bring to waste provision, and also to upgrading of Paul Mays. So just in terms of the household receptacles, they're just purely for new developments to ensure they've got those that provision, and it would be responsibility of the council to empty those as a matter of course.
Thank you.
Do you want to expand on that, Councillor Hutchison? I think, Bruce, I think the question really was, if I'm picking it up right, that if we've got large flatted developments, it'll need a different style of collection than the traditional house to house.
Bruce? Convener, yeah, I mean, certainly when we look at plans for new developments, obviously if they're larger flatted style developments or communal sort of properties, then we would look to have those sort of larger communal waste receptacles as well. That's obviously more effective and more efficient as well, and obviously we'd work with planning colleagues to achieve that.
Okay, thank you. Right, Councillor McPherson and Councillor McGill.
Thanks, Chair. I've two questions here, one to Mark and one to Isabel Smith from Education. Mark, in relation to the amendment you were talking about, they're making the alteration to the report here. It concerned that you mentioned the Milne Park Road, because I remember this going through the planning committee, and albeit you say that it doesn't conflict in any way with the supplementary planning guidance and it reflects the Section 75 agreement, can you confirm there that that's 40 units, and obviously the new threshold now seeking developer contributions is 49 units. However, that 49 units wasn't enforced when planning permission was granted. So I just want to ensure the planning conditions that the planning panel imposed on that consent in no way allows the developer to wriggle out of contributions that have been enforced at the time.
Yeah, I'm not aware of the specific detail of the conditions or requirements imposed on that decision, but purely the mitigation identified in table 2A relates to a new primary school on the South Stirling Gateway site to serve only that development. So it's considered unreasonable to require other developments to contribute to that, and the amendment is simply to reflect that position.
I was actually meaning not just the education here, Mark, it was all the developer contributions, because when that consent was granted, this one here was in draft form. So, I'll take it up offline with probably the development control team, to be honest, take up with Chris and Mike, because it concerns me here that we're bringing something into force now that wasn't in force at the time, and possibly letting a developer wriggle out of contributions that were sought and imposed by the planning panel by way of planning conditions. So I'll take that offline. And the questions I've got for Isabel Smith. Isabel, Mark, I should say before I ask Isabel, I think it's a very, very good report, long overdue, and it's a great piece of work, and it really will tie developers down. And I know there's a balance between getting development and imposing contributions on developers, but I know from my ward, given my ward's getting 90% of all the growth in the LDP, the imposition of the figures for primary health care is absolutely vital. So good piece of work, Mark. I think the only concern I've got is I'll come now to Isabel Smith. Isabel, page 164 is about denominational attendance here. And I have been contacted by constituents in the past over this here that, and I'm mainly looking at the denominational assumptions for Jury's Hill, which everybody knows 3,000 odd houses, brand new village, or town you want to get, maybe even a city coming forward in the future here. On page 164 on that table at 6.1, the assumptions for denominational is only 10% for primary and 10% for secondary. And I would say, and I know there's a methodology, and I've read through it back and forward here, but I think the accusations in the past made by people here is that there's no denominational provision going to be within this village. So if you want to send your child to a denominational school, you have to get the bus. Whereas if you're non-denominational, you can walk to one of the new schools. And, given that this development would like to think it meets all the zero carbon projects, that's on the go and guidance by the government, that flies in the face of it. Never mind the accusation of social engineering, potentially a new development here, you know, so that non-denominational children can't go unless you get the bus. So Isabel, can you give me more information, please?
Yeah, hi, absolutely. So the way we looked at it was purely based on numbers of denominational pupils that we were going to be expecting out of that development. As you rightly point out, we use a figure of 10% that may choose to attend a denominational school. That is actually a very high figure because I reran all of the ratios. In fact, at the moment, we're sitting at 8.8% is the amount of primary pupils that choose to go to a denominational primary school over all of Stirling Council area pupils. But in fact, only just under 5% of those are actually baptised, and the others are choosing to attend denominational schools by placing request. So if we apply those numbers to the peak of primary pupils that are projected at Jewis Hill, that only gives us, if we apply the 5% number of pupils we can expect to be baptised, 28 pupils. So on that basis, there is room in St Mary's in Bannockburn to accommodate those 28 pupils. And we felt that because the number was so low and we had capacity to accommodate those within existing denominational primary provision, we weren't able to ask for any contributions towards denominational education at Jewis Hill. I absolutely do get your point that those pupils are going to need to take a bus. However, that is already the case, obviously, for any pupils who choose to go to a denominational school out with the city centre, certainly. You know, they would need to get transport. And of course, as it is their catchment school, we will be providing the free home to school transport for any of those pupils that choose to go there. And then it's actually a similar situation with the high school. Again, I've ran those numbers, and the numbers are simply too low to be able to justify asking for any developer contributions to build a denominational school. And in addition, you know, that denominational school at such low numbers would have not been operationally viable. So they will be again transported to St Modens, and we certainly will ensure that there is sufficient room for any baptised Roman Catholic children to be able to attend St Modens.
Chair, can I come back in that, please? This is a really important matter for me because my ward and my family, I'm a stout supporter of denominational schools, and this flies in the face of the Net Zero Scotland, you know, and it's very difficult for me not to agree with people that, you know, we're pre-planning ahead. Because if you had building capacity 30%, I would argue that you would have more people moving into the area who want to send their children to denominational schools if there was provision within the new town. I just think it beggars belief. Seriously, and I'm not happy with it. I know where Isabel's coming from, and you're hamstrung with the methodology. I think the methodology is nuts. And in a brand new, this is a blank canvas site, and they can't build in capacity for denominational schools. That sends out a terrible message. I'm very, very uncomfortable with it. But I do know who, and you know, I may take this offline elsewhere and go to the government over it, because this, I would like to know what happened at Bertha Park, for instance, in Perth. There's a new village built there, and we're not the first new kind of area of council to have a new kind of town or city. So, you know, I just hope national guidance has been followed here as well, Chair, but this one does not sit well with me at all. Thank you.
Okay, understood. Thank you. Councillor McGill.
Hi, thanks. So a wee bit similar to Councillor McPherson's point, the pupil product model would appear to be configured around the denomination schools and the number of children using the pupil product ratio. But what it doesn't mention at all is the need for additional support in the form of complex care or ASN provision. And I don't have the figures in front of me, but I know that the figures of the number of children seeking specialist care, not able to be included in mainstream, is astronomically high. It is like quadrupled in the last 10 years, say. That's off the top of my head. I can't give you the exact numbers. So I would, you know, in Stirling, at the moment, what we're doing is looking for an additional city centre location and ensuring that there's rural provision at Balfron High for complex care and at McLaren High. So I just wondered why there wasn't any thought put into creating provision for complex care in ASN in any new development that might be happening there. Thanks.
We have given thought to that, Councillor McGill. Absolutely, we do understand that there is an opportunity with the new, you know, the new high school in particular being built, but obviously the new primary schools as well at Jewett Hill and South Stirling Gateway, and we are just starting now a more in-depth options appraisal around what the actual solution will be at Jewett Hill. So what it's going to look like to be able to provide education for all of these additional pupils, and ASN requirements, including a specialist provision, will be fully integrated into that options appraisal and into the final footprint of any new build that does come out of it.
Okay, thanks. That's good to hear. The other question I had was, I noticed the on page 79 of the document, 1.4 says what the supplementary guidance requirements would follow. And I notice you've got green space and open space. Does that include things like play parks, community centres, the creation of a community?
Yeah, the detail of that is contained in the Green Network supplementary guidance document, and it includes play provision, community space, for example, allotments, and so on. So yeah, that's all covered by that link to the SG on Green Networks.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, thanks, Councillor McGill. Councillor Earl. Sorry, Councillor Tollemache and then Councillor Earl. Apologies.
Okay, thanks, Chair. On page 74, it's a 2.13, the affordable the housing. I would have thought that average price 2019-2020 is not the price today. Is this going to be updated before the actual final document is produced?
Those are the most up-to-date figures. The medium house price figure that were published, I think, a month or so ago. So that's the most up-to-date information. There is obviously a time lag on that data coming through from the Scottish Government, but that's the most up-to-date information we have. It will be reviewed annually as and when the updated figures change to ensure that we're capturing more accurately financial contributions towards affordable housing provision.
Okay, so does this take into account when the increased cost to build houses? And I just feel that this median price is well out of date now with the prices that have happened in the last year to 18 months. Yeah,
it might well be given the lag, but it's the most up-to-date figure that we've got, and you know, the most robust in terms of an evidential basis for calculating financial contributions.
Okay, thanks, Mark. I think Councillor Tollemache makes a good point. I think that's come across in the discussions we've had in the strategic housing investment, especially and particularly due to COVID, the increases. But it is going to be reviewed annually, but it sounds as though it will be a year behind by the looks of things, if that's the way the figures come through. But okay, thank you. Councillor Earl.
Thanks, Jim. I've got two specific and one general comment, if that's all right. Page 121, exemptions, 611, residential development of less than 50, to do with healthcare contributions. Residential development of less than 50, and C, affordable housing units by the council on RSL. I suppose my question is, why is someone who builds 49 not having to make any contribution to healthcare? And why is affordable housing units not make a contribution to healthcare? Because everybody in them uses the same services.
Yeah, it's a valid point, Councillor Earl. Just to explain the 50 unit threshold, that was made at the request of NHS Forth Valley through the process of reviewing the contribution approach. And the main reason for that is to make their involvement in the Section 75 process more manageable from an administration point of view, and it's an approach that they take with other authorities. It doesn't make a huge difference in terms of the allocated sites that are no longer required to contribute. So we've 7 sites, of which I think there are about 110 units across both catchments, the Plain, Bannock, Burn, Fulling and Cowie. But there are many small brownfield sites. Millen Park one's included within that, of course, and it's underway. The second point you made about kind of piecemeal submissions just to try and avoid the need to contribute. Paragraph 6.12 sets out that it seeks to negate that basically and safeguard against that. So applications will be looked at and around. So if you've got a series of applications, they will be considered cumulatively, purely to capture the need to contribute at the once that threshold is reached.
Thank you, Mark. Thanks for the question about the answer to the NHS. That was fascinating. Thank you for that. But my question was about affordable housing. Why are they exempt as well?
Well, it's purely to reflect that the council cover the costs of affordable housing provision. So it's not the developer covering those costs. It's the council meet the costs of the requirements. So yes, they're required to contribute, but it's not for developers to do that. It's for the council.
Yeah, there's a wider interesting question there, but thank you for that response. Then going back to page 73, the healthcare infrastructure 2.9 on it talks about the miscalculation that's been identified through the process and is going to be rectified. Excellent, thank you. I just want to be clear on this, that miscalculation relates to this draft guidance, and it wasn't in place in the existing guidance that we're using at the moment.
The miscalculation is reflected in the current draft supplementary guidance. So the revised version before today will rectify that, has the correct figures included.
Right, but the existing guidance we are using now, that's in place, that is not affected by this. That miscalculation is not in that guidance, if you see what I mean.
It isn't that guidance, but it's in advancing Section 75s. We're obviously aware that there's an error within that, and we apply through the Section 75 process the correct figure. So this will sort of achieve alignment between what we're doing in terms of preparing Section 75s and what the guidance that we've got in place is saying.
Okay, so it's calculated out correctly, if you see what I mean. Yeah, yes. Thank you.
Yeah. Stephen Clark, I think, wants to get in, Councillor Earl, on the affordable housing element, I suspect.
Yeah, just in terms of Councillor Earl's question, I suppose a point I would make is that, of our waiting list of around 3,000 households, the vast majority, you know, over 90% of them will already be living in the Stirling area, will already be using health services, education and so on. So it's not necessarily growing from a population out with the area, they're already within Stirling generally. Thank you.
Thank you. Fair point, yeah. And then
general point.
General point was, how are we going to audit and show the developer contributions journey, you know, contribution made and what it's used for out the other end, clearly from that point of view? Because, you know, I do have a sort of wider comment about, obviously, developer contributions. They're not really developer contributions. They are the contributions from people who buy houses, because it's all factored in. That's you know, the developers aren't giving anything away here. Everybody pays proportionately for the contributions that are required, and that's fair enough, and the contributions are sensible. But from a transparency point of view, it's just how we can demonstrate clearly what that money has got, so that people can see where it went.
I see Christina wants to come in here.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Chris Cox, Planning and Building Standards Manager. Yes, this very matter has just been reported to the last Finance and Resources Committee, and it has been agreed that we will be providing quarterly briefing notes to the committee on the money that we've received and how that money has been spent. I'll just provide just a general comment about where the developer contribution derives from. It's a blend, and it varies between different developments, between whether the developer takes that off of the land value and it's the landowner that pays for that contribution, or the developer absorbs it in other ways, for example, passing it on to the sale price. But you know, there isn't a universal way that contribution is brought forward by the developer, but it's the developer that we get it from through the Section 75 process.
Thanks, Chris. Could I ask that briefing note? Could that, Jim? Do you think I'd like to see that go out to all members, not just F&E members?
Well, I think the minutes go to every member, but we could specific. Is that a problem, Christina? Distributing?
I can't see it being a problem, but I would speak with governance officers just in case there's anything that I'm not seeing, but I'm more than happy to do that.
Please do. Thank you.
Thank you.
Right, Councillor McPherson, you want to come back in?
Yeah, Chair, it's a quick comment about the point Councillor Earl made, as if he's feeling sorry for the developers. I don't. The bottom line being here is they come in, make significant profits, and when you see some of the chief executives, the National House Builders being paid £100 million, and I kid you not, it's not a mistake by me, £100 million bonus 3 or 4 years ago, and then the bulk at making developers contributions. So, you know, I think it's proportionate, and it's probably the maximum we can extract from them, but I shed no tears or have any tears for developers having to pay for contributions.
Thanks, Councillor.
Sorry, Jim, I don't think I mentioned that. I was feeling sorry for the people buying their houses.
Yeah, well, I think the point was made by Christina. I think is a good one, that the developer passes on the sorry, you made the point. The developer passes on the cost, but they can recover that by not paying through the nose for land. I think there's a balance there. It doesn't always have to come from the property buyer. But thanks. I've no other comments, but Mark, can I just thank you for the report? I mean, it's I think we've got a robust document here. I did ask the question of you in a different session about whether we can expect the industry to balk at what's in there and perhaps end up in the courts. If we do, then I hope, because we have such a robust document, well thought through, that we're able to manage that. I don't think so. I think it's proportionate, and I welcome it. I think I do welcome the opportunity to review this once it's been in place for a year or two to see if it needs to be amended, but that'll come through the process anyway. So we've been asked to, on page 71 to approve the guidance, approve the contribution report and approve responses. Are we content to do so? Okay, lovely. Thanks very much for that. Okay, thanks, Mark. Move on to item 10, Food Standard Scotland Capacity and Capability Audit. Is it Linda presenting us?
Yes, Councillor, thank you. Linda Hill, I'm the Acting Regulatory Services Manager. I'm bringing forward this paper on behalf of the Regulatory Services Food, Health and Safety team. The paper sets out the progress which has been made following an audit undertaken by Food Standards Scotland. The audit was undertaken to assess the capability and capacity of Stirling Council to deliver official food controls. The paper further specifies the actions which have been undertaken with regard to the completion of the agreed audit action plan. And the committee is asked to note the findings of the audit report and associated action plan and to take assurance from the progress that has been made with regard to the activities specified in the action plan. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you. I don't see any questions. Right, Councillor Errol and Councillor McGill.
Thanks, Jim. Yeah, I'm pleased to see this report. I'm obviously not, no one's pleased at the circumstances, but I'm pleased to see the report. And I think there's a couple of helpful, points to be made here in the context of this and why this here. I mean, I know the service sought the Food Standard Scotland to come and do this work. They were, it was very proactive that they got them in to do this, and I think that's to be really welcomed on that. And I, applaud the work that's gone into it. But the question is the responses, or the original audit was sent to the council on August last year. And I suppose my question is, why is it until now that we've seen it, if you see what I mean? Why didn't we see it earlier?
Drew, you want to reply?
Yeah, Drew Leslie, Senior Manager for Infrastructure. Yeah, thanks for the question, Councillor. Just picking up on the approach here. This was primarily an operational matter, and for a long period, the service had inter-authority support in place to deal with and manage the risk. I think that was the approach that we took. It should be remembered at the time that the intervention programme of inspections was suspended by Food Standards Scotland, so that allowed us to focus on this at the time. And where we did need support with inspections on approved premises, we were fortunate that we had arrangements in place with other authorities. I think to highlight some of the actions there, we were offered, as a service, we were offered the full support by the Chief Executive and Chief Operating Officer to deal with that, and that included additional support from legal and financial services, and in particular internal audit have supported the service both in peer review and giving assurance to the Chief Executive, and also supporting the service in how we've worked with Food Standards Scotland as well. So Gordon O'Connor has spent a lot of time with the service, and I think the most important action there was that we progressed and undertook the actions identified by Food Standards Scotland. So, I think the timing, we had a review meeting, a face-to-face review meeting in November with Food Standards Scotland, and that really established the progress that we've made, and that's why we're reporting to this committee on that. And I would say that we still have a road to travel on this, and it's we're moving into the next phase. So I think the timing is appropriate, and we're happy to continue to brief members on this issue as well. So.
Yeah, thank you, Drew. That's a fair answer. I would also like to say that I was pleased to see when the audit arrived in August and the amount of work that's gone on between then and now, and December really, and the huge amount of work they've done to complete a lot of the actions and progress all the others. I think is to the credit of the service that they've clearly worked very hard on it. So thank you for that. That's recognised.
Councillor McGill and Councillor Tolmack.
Yeah, I'd just like to echo what Councillor Errol said there. I was quite uplifted by the time I'd got to the end when I saw just the amount of progress. But fundamentally, it's come down to lack of staff, and it's 9.5 full-time equivalents. It's saying, which I don't know how many is in the workforce already, but that does seem quite significant. And presumably, and there is mention through the report, some people being employed but really very limited experience because they're just new to the workforce. So how do you tackle that? What kind of creative ways have you had to do that? Because if they're not coming out of university or training in other local authorities, where do you get these people to fill the gaps? Just wondering, what kind of steps have been taken.
I'll ask Linda to come in on that one, Councillor McGill. Thanks.
Thank you both councillors for your words there about the service. I'll be sure to take those back. Yes, councillor, recruitment and retention continues to be a strong focus on the part of the service. What has occurred following the audit and following the huge amount of support from senior management team, we currently have a staffing complement of 4.7 full-time equivalent, with a further 3 officers coming on board over the course of the next couple of weeks, which will bring us very close to our targeted 9.5. As part of building up the intervention programme, you'll see from the appendices that there is a food law recovery plan, and there is also a movement to the new food law risk rating system, which reprofiles how we categorise and therefore how often we conduct interventions at regulated premises. So we're in the middle of a balancing process. As this intervention programme builds up, we onboard staff. The issues of suitably qualified, experienced officers are national issues. However, locally, what we are doing, we have recruited a number of experienced officers. Food is a unique part of environmental health, in that if you qualify, you're still required to do a certain period of time post-qualification, building up your experience. So it's a very complex area of service delivery, but we have a graduate programme, and we are working with REHIS and working with other local authorities just to build up that experience. And just to feed back to what Drew said, we do have a significant amount of inter-authority support from colleagues in other areas where we need it, and I think that is a testament to these frameworks working as they're supposed to. When a particular authority needs support in a certain area, they can reach out to other local authorities and get that experience and get that support. So yep, a process of collaboration through REHIS and a process of recruitment with the support of the senior management team, and that's how we're addressing it, councillor.
That's good. It's good to hear the collaboration there. That's good. Thanks.
I think you raise a point though. Recruitment and retention across the board's a problem that we need to look at very closely. Councillor Tolmack. Sorry, Brian, do you want to come in to answer that?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Brian Roberts, Chief Operating Officer for Infrastructure and Environment. As Drew referenced, he's got support. The service has got support of myself as the Chief Operating Officer responsible for this area, and also Chief Exec. And the comments from members on the proactive nature and stance that the service has taken is welcomed, and thanks for those. And as Linda says, we'll feed that back to the service, but also to the other services that have supported Drew and Linda and the team across the areas that Drew mentioned there. And I think it is important to highlight that there are national resource challenges within environmental health and food standards. I personally attended a session with Food Standards Scotland and other local authorities looking at some of those recruitment challenges, and also what the kind of career succession planning straight from trainings within colleges and universities are. And there's longer term fixes that are required to be put in, as well as Linda says, a lot of the short term support that local authorities are providing to each other. And I think it's also important to remember that Food Standards Scotland are there as a regulator, but also support, and the proactive nature that Drew and Linda approached food standards in the first place I think it was testament to the support that we got from them in order to identify where we had improvements that were required, but actually to pull on their expertise and the wider expertise of the industry to try and help us make those improvements.
Thanks for that, Brian. Councillor Tolmach.
Okay, thanks, Chair. Please can I associate myself with the comments from Councillor McGill and Councillor. Councillor. The question I have is, what are the lessons that we've learned from this? Moving forward to help us in the future.
Okay, Drew.
Yeah, Councillor Tolmach, thanks for that, and thanks for the comments. There's a couple of things for me as not being especially in the senior management role, not being a subject matter expert, but I think the long-term resilience of the service has to be looked at as an authority. You know, we need to. The one thing that I have seen that Food Standards Scotland have looked at is your capacity when you are reviewing the resources required to do a job, establishing those resources from a solid evidence base. And I think that maybe stands for other areas of the services that I see, and I'm sure it stands for officers that are leading other service areas themselves. So looking at that capacity within the team when you are making choices about where we deploy resources. I think the other area is a risk-based approach, and we were, when we realised the challenge, we were able to deploy resources in the right place at the right time as well. So I think I've a vigilant eye against the key pressure points as well. I'll maybe let Linda follow up on some of the comments and experience from within the service.
Thank you. From the services perspective, there are a couple of learning points I think that I would reflect upon. Firstly, I think that it must be kept in mind that the environmental health officers are also hugely involved in pandemic work, and were hugely involved in the work to control the disease during the pandemic and to enforce the COVID legislation. And I think their draw towards that imminent public safety matter highlights how valuable the food work is, because that work still exists and it's still absolutely vital. So for a learning perspective, I think this has absolutely hit home just how vital the integrity of that food safety team is. A second reflection I would bring forward from the services, to follow up on the points that both Drew and Brian made there, the way that the service approached this openly and honestly with the regulator Food Standards Scotland, to go to them to request their support, and the support was forthcoming and it was given in the absolute spirit of collaboration, and we really did find all of the time that the officers from Food Standards Scotland spent with us exceptionally valuable, because of these people have huge expertise in when you have a problem, what you can do to resolve it. So I would say that the serve as a learning experience, our approach to this, I don't think we could have approached it better. When we knew we had a problem, we absolutely followed the correct steps, and these frameworks kicked in and worked exactly how they're supposed to work, which is probably why we've recovered so well.
Thank you.
Okay, I've no other hands up. Linda, thanks for that update. It's been a good debate here. We've been asked to note the audit findings and to take assurance on progress. So I think we're all satisfied that that's the way forward. Okay, thank you. On to item 11. You will hopefully have all received an email this morning. The governance officer has suggested that this is not a paper to approve, but a paper to note. I'll come to that when we do the summing up. But in that context, I'll invite Linda to introduce the paper.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. I'm bringing this paper forward on behalf of the regulatory service again. The Food Law Code of Practice Scotland 2019 requires that each food authority will complete an annual service plan which details their food safety intervention programme. This service plan is also requested as part of the audit action plan mentioned in the previous paper. We are requesting that the committee now note the food safety service plan and that the committee request an annual update on progress by the service against the objectives of the plan. Happy to take any questions, councillors.
No, I've got no hands up. Councillor Earl.
It's more of a comment, if that's all right, Jim.
Yeah, fire away.
Thank you. Yeah, as Linda says, this follows on directly from the previous paper, and I was pleased to see it. It's very detailed operation, so I understand the comments you've just made regarding approval or noting. But I was pleased to see it, and I think this is part of the area where a lot of work's gone into it. And I would also just make a note on recommendation 2 that an appropriate update on delivering against the service plan would be welcome, I think, to demonstrate what's happening.
Okay, Councillor McGill.
Yeah, just got a wee question, observation, I suppose, that there's a comment about officers having to work remotely, and that's maybe contributed to the difficulties, some of them. So presumably that'll hopefully not be going to be as restrictive. Is there plans in place to have officers working back in the office?
Linda? Oh, sorry, I got Drew first, then Linda. Apologies.
Sorry, I'll let Linda
follow
on. Thanks.
Thank you for the question, councillor. The comments that relates to accessing systems and remote working relate primarily to updating our management information system. So those remarks are around perhaps a time when restrictions meant that visits to food premises were, for public health reasons, limited, but primarily it's the remote working and updating the uniform system. So I'll come back on the 2 parts of that, if that's okay. Yes, the restrictions around our ability to visit the premises we regulate have reduced, and we are now absolutely in a position where we can get into these places, we can see where they are, and we can start to work with them in a process of engagement to get them to where we need them to be. So that is all working pretty much as it was before the pandemic. And on the other element of that, we are doing a lot of work with colleagues in our technology team around systems and how our management information system is hosted, with a view to looking at cloud-based systems and improvements in firewalls, which will consequently improve the access to the management information system and make that a far more smoother process. And just maybe another wee point around that is the management information system that we use pulls information directly through to Food Standards Scotland so that they can see where we are in our intervention programme, and thus the reason why that smoothness of accessibility is essential. But it's a sharp focus for the service, and we're working with colleagues in other services to enable that, councillor.
Okay, thanks, Linda.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, no further hands up. We'll come to the recommendations on page 301. Are we agreed to change the word approve to note? Thank you.
Thank you.
And the second part is to get further updates at future meetings. So that's agreed. Thank you very much. Can we move on then to item 12, Alive with Nature plan for the next 34 years. David, is it yourself introducing this?
Yes, thank you, convener. I'm David Hopper, Service Manager for Sustainable Development and Public Transport. I'm pleased to be presenting this paper to seek committee approval for the Alive with Nature plan. This plan is one of 5 key strategic plans emanating from the Climate and Nature Emergency Plan. It acts as Stirling's key strategic direction in taking forward the fundamental actions relating to both carbon sequestration and repair and development of our natural systems. The plan has been developed with key partners and went to consultation over the latter part of 2021. Over 90% of respondents, the consultation agreed with the visions and objectives of the plan, with 70% agreeing to the plan that the plan identifies the correct priorities. Such a positive response has been reflected in the number of communities currently coming forward to the council showing keenness to be involved in related programme of activities. Progress update papers will be brought back to the committee as the action plan is developed, and we will keep you updated, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay. It's taken a while for the hands to appear on my screen, folks, sorry. Councillor Earl and Councillor Tolmie.
Thanks, Jim. Yeah, thanks, David, and thanks for that, for the briefing on this that some of us managed to get to. It's really, really helpful and useful, so appreciate that. A couple of sort of general questions, really, about the impact this document will have, and also the climate and nature emergency plan that sits over it. So how will this is approved today, it stops being a draft, it becomes the plan. How does that immediately have any impact on our existing procurement policies, for example? And how does it have any impact on, say, because flooding is talked about in there and it's a significant impact to natural flood management. Does that have any impact on flood schemes that have already been worked up to some degree, such as Callander, Bridge of Allen and Stirling? So I'm trying to get an understanding of how in the face this will be from a point of view of people and what other policies might need to change because of this and the Kane plan.
Yeah, I mean, I think the answer to that is first and foremost, this is a huge arena that we're entering into and accelerating on. And I think fundamentally we need to understand all the related policies, whether it be procurement or whether it be adaptation, flood-related strategies, and look at how we can interstitch the objectives of this plan. This is principally about bringing back nature into the forefront. It's about biodiversity, opportunism, and maximising habitat creation. But principally, the driver here in the context of the climate emergency is about tree planting. This is about carbon sequestration. So what it does is it gives prominence to that need to plant trees in the right place, the tent poles of biodiversity, and work much closer with the strength of this strategy behind us, to work much closer in the other areas to make sure that it's interstitched into what we're doing on the ground.
Okay, Bruce Reekie wants to come in as well on that point.
That's convener. It's Bruce Reekie, Senior Manager for Environment and Place. Just touching upon Councillor Earl's question there about flooding and flood mitigation. It was just to say, Councillor Earl, in terms of all of our schemes, we always look at natural sort of flood risk mitigation as well, very much looking at sort of upstream opportunities to try and sort of mitigate any sort of flood risk further downstream. So that's built into our modelling processes at this point in time. Obviously, sometimes they can add capacity, but they sometimes do not fully negate the need for actual sort of flood interventions like sort of engineering structures, etc. But just to give you that assurance that those issues are looked upstream at this point in time.
Thank you. Thanks both for that. I appreciate those answers. It's just when we look at reports generally, all our reports, and there's obviously an implication pages which covers climate change, sustainability, environmental impact. Will we see under every report that there's been a requirement to see if this report and the climate and nature emergency umbrella report needs to be referred to, and if it does, that it's compliant with those plans? Will there be that kind of check and balance of going through that puts it under, in people's radar?
Yeah, I mean that is the essence of this. That ultimately we as a local authority take our decisions in the most holistic manner that comprehensively take into account the climate emergency? And I suppose the answer to that is yes, ultimately we need to get to that point that no matter what the decision's being made by committee or council, that it fully considers the implications of that in the context of carbon emissions and the opportunities of biodiversity. So yes, it will take time to come, but there are other local authorities looking at this and slightly ahead of us to look at how we can ensure that financial priorities, social priorities are as important as environmental priorities and that we're taking decisions in the round.
I'm aware, David, that work has started, that we do embed it into every document that we produce, but it's a point well made by Councillor Earl.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, Councillor Tolmach.
Thank you. Okay, it's good to see this report, and thanks for all the work that the staff have put into that and for the feedback from the consultation. One question is, are we making sure, David, this is to you, I think, that we align all of the policies of the council in with this? So about trees, about other things, so we're doing that. And perhaps I'll give you my second part of the question at the same time. What way are we encouraging our local communities, community councils, etc., to engage with this? And would officers be able to attend community councils or speak to people? Because it's not just about what we do as a council, it's also about what the individuals do in their gardens, for example. So what way can we do those two things, please? Thank you.
Yeah, the first question around ensuring that this is a central piece or a significant piece within all council policy, that's been recognised at the Climate and Nature Emergency Board level. And we've recognised that we need to do a gap analysis of council policy in the round to try and look at how we can interstitch the climate emergency and nature emergency into our strategic planning. It's a challenge, it is a challenge, but that's essentially what we need to do. It's to ensure the golden thread of the net zero position is enthreaded through all council areas. That's critical. The engagement with communities is vital to this. There are many communities, as I said in my introduction, who are very keen to engage with this agenda, particularly the whole tree planting and nature piece. There are a number of communities coming forward. We need to understand the magnitude of it. We need to be able to resource it. We need to work closely with partners. And there are a lot of partners working on this. There's excellent stuff being done by the Forth Rivers Trust, the National Park, working closely with SEPA, Nature Scotland. And we need to establish, so the aim is at the back of this hopeful approval, is to develop the governance with partners so that we're able to resource ourselves appropriately to take it forward.
Okay, there's no other questions. David, private landowners have a part to play here. I've had discussions with you about hogweed, etc., how we can eradicate that and plant trees in its place. Where do you think we go with trying to engage with non-public bodies, if you like?
Yeah, it's a vital piece of work that needs to be done. The majority of land within the Stirling Council area sits in private ownership. The actual climate and nature emergency plan is referred to as lead, enable, inspire. So therefore, our public sector leadership needs to come prominent. We need to get the public sector bodies together and try and understand the land ownership issues and work on that as a priority. But at the same time, and slightly behind, but in parallel, we need to work with a landowners forum. So in the climate emergency plan, we have committed to working with willing landowners, and I have to say preliminary engagement with landowners. There's a lot of willing out there. The examples that the Forth Rivers Trust are working on up in the areas in the upper reaches of the Forth system, up in Balquhidder, for example, there's real cooperation going on with landowners. So I think we will be pushing at an open door. But as I say, this is not a Stirling Council-led thing per se. This is working with the wider partnership and the public sector partners. And in some cases, we may have to sit back and let them lead this as well.
Okay, you're absolutely right. There's a huge number of volunteers out there willing to engage with us. Okay, no other questions. Page 323. We're asked to approve the plan and to request annual updates. Are we agreed?
Agreed.
Okay, thank you. Right, we're on to housing, redevelopment at Glasgow Road.
Yeah, I'll speak to this, Chair. It's Stephen Clark, Chief Officer for the Housing Service. So this report seeks approval to commence the procurement process for the design and build of 8 new homes at 24 Glasgow Road in Stirling. Section 1 of the report explains that Council in June 2020 approved the demolition of the existing 5-storey flatted development on this site to be redeveloped for social housing. Section 2 explains that planning permission has been granted for 8 cottage flats and notes that there are over 1,100 applicants on the housing list choosing this area. Section 2 also explains that we propose to utilise the Scotland Excel framework for new build residential construction through a design and build contract. So, Environment and Housing Committee is asked to approve the commencement of the procurement process for the development of the design and build contract for 24 Glasgow Road. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Stephen. Right, no hands up. Are we therefore content with this paper and happy to approve?
Agreed.
Okay, thank you very much. Item 14, Raploch Regeneration update and Site 6 development.
Thanks. I'll speak to this again, Chair. Stephen Clark, Chief Officer for the Housing Service. So this report explains that Stirling Council intends to enter into a construction contract to deliver 32 homes on Site 6 at Raploch. Section 1 of the report provides a background to regeneration activity at Raploch, noting that earlier Environment and Housing Committees enabled a framework agreement to be signed enabling the construction of 169 homes across sites 8, 9 and 22. Section 2 of the report explains that officers have agreed to split the final Site 6 of the agreement between the Council and Forth Housing Association, and details the steps taken to transfer land owned by the Housing Revenue Account to the Housing Association for this purpose. Section 2 of the report also notes there is over 1,000 housing list applicants choosing this area and provides the mix for the site consisting of 1, 2 and 3 bedroom homes. Section 2 also provides an explanation of the increased costs from previous phases. So in terms of recommendations, these include noting the transfer of land of Forth Housing to Forth Housing Association, noting that officers will conclude a construction contract up to a value of £7 million with Robertson Partnership Homes, and to note the agreed housing mix for the site and progress towards the wider delivery of the project. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor McPherson.
Yeah, there's just a very quick point, given this is the last Environment and Housing meeting in this cycle, and obviously there's another item on the agenda, but it's in closed session. But I think this again demonstrates the commitment the administration set from day one when we took over the administration about delivering social rented housing and facilitating private housing. I think it's brilliant. It's great to see it. And again, Scottish Government have come up with the money, £2.8 million, as in page 390. So this administration has delivered for Stirling and housing. I'm very pleased to be part of it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Before I come on to Councillor Earl, I'd just like to say that Site 6 in Raploch is one I never thought would be developed. It's the most difficult site in the whole of the regeneration project. So I'm delighted that this paper is here. Councillor Earl.
Thanks, Jim. Yeah, very pleased to see. I agree with you. I've thought that I'm very pleased to see this site being developed and everything. It's not been easy, but it's a testament to the officers who've worked, and we've got there, which is fantastic. Question actually, which could apply to other developments, but we get the list of houses on page 390 and the housing mix: 1 bedroom cottage flats 6, 1 bedroom cottage flats with wet floor shower 2, and then 2 bed 13, wet floor shower 3. I suppose my question is just why do we not just build in a wet floor shower to these properties rather than try and work out how many we might need? Now, I suppose there's probably an extra cost to doing a wet floor shower, although it's reasonably, I don't know what that will be, but there'll certainly be an extra cost to having to install one where there isn't one already in place. So I just wonder why we just don't do it as standard.
Thanks for your question, Councillor Earl. It's my understanding that the majority of the ground floor cottage flats will have a wet floor. Sure, obviously those that are at the cottage flats which are on the first floor would be less suitable for that. If somebody has a ground floor recommendation, we would put that up the stairs. I'm not sure if every ground floor property has a wet floor. My colleague Gillian Hessett, Senior Development Officer for the Council, might be able to clarify that with us. If Gillian's on the call.
Hi there. Good afternoon. We decided that the best way forward was just to take a split of the ground floor flats and decide that that just about approximately half of them would go forward with the wet floor showers. This is because we don't know at the development stage who these flats will be allocated to. So we thought by having a mix, it would cater for a range of abilities. We took advice from the allocations on generally when they have people coming forward for this type of accommodation, what the general trends are and splits for this kind of need. So we thought that it would be better having some than none, but didn't go the full way, just so we could continue to cater for a range of needs.
Right. Thank you, Gillian.
Yeah. Also,
Stephen.
Sorry.
Yeah. Well, I just want to make the point. I'll let you come back, but I just want to make the point that if they're on the ground floor, surely we should be thinking about defaulting to just installing them, because people who are in them may not need them now, but they might need them in 2 years or 3 years or 5 years and whatever. And I'm not clear why we don't have a policy approach that just says, if we can do it, we build it in as standard, because we're covering all the bases then.
We can revisit this in terms of the number of ground floor cottage flats on many sites. For example, on the site we just discussed there at Glasgow Road, all of the ground floor cottage flats are going to have wet floor bathrooms. I mean, we've got around 68 households in this area that have a ground floor recommendation. Most of them won't require a wet floor bathroom, though. It will be a ground floor recommendation. I do take your point that many of them might have medical needs that may require a wet floor bathroom at a later date. I'm happy that we review that again, just to consider if we've got it right in terms of the numbers, though. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Tolmach.
Just also to welcome this. This is very good news. And a question, probably more of a comment actually, on 2.8. I'm very pleased to see that there will be a solar PV and battery storage okay for these properties.
Okay, thanks. Right, no further questions or comments. It's a paper for noting, given that we've given delegated authority in the past. So can I thank officers for getting us to this stage, and I look forward to the scaffolding going up soon. Okay, thank you very much. Right, the next item 15, the second part, the appendix is an exempt item, the governance officer has advised. So if we need to go into private session on the appendix, let me know, but I'd welcome questions on the main paper. Then if we have to, we move on to private session. The second point to make is you will all have received an updated appendix. We have it available online if needs be, but obviously if we move into private session. So can I invite questions on the first part of the paper? Introduction first, apologies. David?
Thank you, Convener. It's David Hoppy here, Service Manager for Sustainable Development and Public Transport. I'll just be brief. This paper is to seek approval for the Park and Ride Bus Service Tender Award. Following tendering, one response has been received. The contract will run from February 2022 to 2025. And as you say, the appendix is available, has been sent to members. Happy to take any questions.
Okay, right, I'll open it up. Councillor Earl.
Thanks, Jim. I have a concerns about this, to be honest with you, because when you read the report, you've got that there were 3 lots potential electric hydrogen, Euro 6, Euro 5. We got 1 that was within budget, I think, for Euro 5, and I think there was 1 that was out of budget, which I think was Euro 6. The difference between Euro 6 and Euro 5 is nitrogen oxides is a big thing, because it was the emissions for nitrogen oxides between the two were slashed between between Euro 5 and Euro 6. Now, when we've just been talking about an Alive with Nature plan, and we've already passed a climate and nature emergency plan, and I'm not blaming the officers for this at all, because they only got 1 submission that was within budget. My point being is they're only then allowed to progress to 1 point because of those constraints, and have to take what they've got effectively, which is one submission that's for the least environmentally friendly classification, and they've got to put it forward. You know, they have no choice because all the other boxes were ticked. And when you look at the contract, it's a 70-30 quality price or price quality split. How quality is split up amongst that 30% is another question, because a lot of this you would say might come under the quality, but there's already other aspects you have to build into the quality mix as well. So I suppose what I'm saying is I'm really worried that we've ended up in this position. And this is another classic example of why we need to be involved in the procurement process of these contracts at the other end of the process, because we're being shown this right now at the sharp end. And had this come earlier in the process, there might have been a discussion about how we want to approach the emissions requirements and how much priority we put on it. And that might lead to a change in procurement. It might have led to a change in the budget available to allow officers to consider a higher budget to get a better quality vehicle. So for all those reasons, I'm not very content.
Yeah, there's I'll let Brian speak. He's got.
Can I allow Brian Roberts to come in? I mean, I could make comment here as well, but I'll leave it to Brian.
Okay, thanks, Chair. Brian Roberts, Chief Operating Officer for Infrastructure and Environment. Thanks, Councillor Earl, for the question. You're obviously aware that there's been the change recently agreed by Council to change the procurement process for contracts of this value. So the approval at the start of the process will be the position going forward for contracts, as you know. However, this process has been started before that change of council was made, and I know you're making the point just to reinforce why that change was required. I think one of the points David would probably come in with is the procurement process is one thing, but what the market can provide is the other thing. So I think it was right that we went out with the 3 lots looking at the environmental credentials of the vehicles that could be run, but also understanding that there is very limited local suppliers that can provide hydrogen or electric at this stage. The contract that's proposed is, you'll see in 2.2, is for a 3-year maximum contract, an 18-month initial period with options then for extensions beyond that. And that's a recognition of the work that we're doing in parallel, looking at opportunities for us to bring in electric buses for the park and ride itself. So I think it's very much a moment in time in that we've got a park and ride provision that we need to continue. We need to have a contractual arrangement that allows that provision to continue. But be rest assured that the service is looking at opportunities for the provision of electric buses for park and ride.
So Jim, could I just follow up on that? Is that right?
Well,
thanks, Brian.
No, please do. You know, it's the point you're making is one that obviously myself and the vice convener has made, but we're in a moment in time which is not of our making.
I suppose my question would be, is submissions were only received in respect of lot 2 and lot 3. So there was a submission for Euro 6 and there was a submission for Euro 5. with lot 3 being the only submission within budget. Well, I don't know what the submission for the Euro 6 was. I haven't got the details of it. Because it fits within budget, therefore officers have no choice but to bring this forward because they can't go out with the budget that's set for it. However, we are shortly about to set a budget, a council-wide budget. So is there not a case for saying, well, if there's a potential to adopt a better contract that complies with Euro 6 emissions, should we not rush to approve this today and take the opportunity of looking at that option, because we might want to set a budget that allows officers to comply with it and take it?
Can I suggest that we perhaps go into private session and we can discuss the details of the 3 offers? I think it's worthy of a debate, but I don't believe it's one that we're allowed to have in public, given the recommendation from the governance officer. Are we agreed to that?
Agreed.
Chair.
Right.
Well, yeah. Okay. Please, can I make a comment actually before we do that?
Please do. Yeah.
Thank you. And I'll make sure that I don't go into what the red document is. I just want to make a comment. This is approval for the 14th, which is next Monday, and we are meeting on the 10th. I just wanted to say I'm not happy about the lateness that the councillors have been given the chance to make a comment on that in open session, because I'm not going to discuss the contract, and I wanted to record it before we went into closed session. I think that is not good of the governance to leave it at that late.
Okay. Point taken. Now it's 12:16. We're due to have a break at 12:30. Now, given that we're going into private session anyway, can I suggest that we have our break now and return at 12:30 in private session? Is that agreed?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Okay.
Agreed.
Thank you.
Agreed.
See you at 12:30. Okay, thank you very much. Welcome back to the meeting of Environment and Housing. We've gone into private session on item 15 because we've been discussing some of the details of the appendix, the cost details. We've had the session, so we're back into public session, so can I invite Michelle to do a roll call, please?
Certainly. Councillor Errol.
Present.
Councillor Gibson. He's not present. He's submitted his apologies for the next session. Councillor Houston submitted his apologies. Councillor Houston. Oh, sorry. Councillor Hutchison.
Present.
Councillor McPherson.
Yeah.
Councillor Majuri.
Present.
Councillor McGill. Councillor Thompson.
Present.
And Councillor Tolamash.
Yeah, yes, I'm here.
Thank you.
Thanks, Michelle. Okay, right, we'll go back into discussions around the item 15, park and ride bus services. Councillor McPherson.
Yeah, can I propose to go straight to the vote, the procedural motion, please?
Okay, that been put. Does that have to go to the vote of the members? Michelle, advice? I'm not getting any advice.
Standing orders there. I need procedural motions. I need obviously Councillor McPherson.
You're breaking up, Michelle.
Sorry. We need to have procedural motions. Councillor McPherson has moved that we need a seconder and then put without debate and the vote conducted by a roll call. So if we've got a seconder, and then I'll do a roll call vote to go towards procedural motion.
Thank you. Do you have a seconder?
I'll second that.
Okay.
All right.
So we have a procedural motion put in front of us, proposed by Councillor McPherson, seconded by Councillor McGill, and this is to see if we move straight to the vote on this item. Councillor Errol.
Against. Yeah, principle.
Councillor Hutchison.
Against, in principle, too.
Councillor McPherson.
What?
Councillor Majuri.
Against that principle.
Councillor McGill.
For.
Councillor Thompson.
Not voting.
And Councillor Tolamash.
Against.
The procedural motion is not carried. Therefore, we can enter into debate.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, it was the procedural motion was 2 for, 4 against, and 1 not voting. I do beg your pardon.
Thanks for that, Michelle. Okay, right. It's questions to officers. Councillor Tolamash.
Is it
questions? I'll allow questions and comments at the same time.
Thank you, Chair. I will reluctantly accept that, although I have reservations.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Errol.
Yeah, convener. I'd just like to thank actually the debate that took on in closed session on the questions and answers that were given. It was helpful, useful, and I'm pleased we took the time to do that and go into the depth of this and the complexities of it. It was very worthwhile, and a contract of this size and what it's doing warranted it. So I'm pleased about that. Again, I agree with Councillor Tolamash. I don't think we have any choice given the details we've been afforded, but to approve the contract that's before us.
Okay, thank you. No other comments? No hands up? On that basis, on page 399, the recommendations to approve the award of the contract. Are we content?
Agreed.
Okay, thank you very much. we're now moving on to item 16, which again is in two parts. The award of contract for roofing, wall finishes and external works. If we want to discuss the content of the contract award on appendix, we'll not need to go into private session. So I'll open it up for discussion. Oh, sorry, I should invite the officer to present the paper. My apologies.
Thanks, Chair. It's Stephen Clark, Chief Officer for Housing. So this report is seeking approval to award the contract for the renewal of roofing, wall finishes and other external works. Section 1 of the report explains that this contract will help the housing service to meet its capital plan commitments for the next year. Section 2 of the report explains the procurement route for this contract, with the award recommendation report being attached as an appendix. In terms of the recommendation, committee is therefore asked to approve the contract award for the renewal of roofing, wall finishes and other external works contract. Thank you.
Okay, right. Questions to the officers? Councillor Earl, you got your hand up, or is it your legacy hand? Okay.
Yeah, sorry, Tim.
No, fine. No other questions, no hands up. Are we content to approve the award of this contract?
Agreed.
Okay, thank you very much. So we come to the very last item on the agenda, item 17, which if you read the heading, we can discuss whether or not to take it in private session. I believe the advice is to move into private session for this item. Are we agreed?
Agreed.
Agreed, thank you. Could we then switch off the video?
Excuse me, Jim? Oh, you please go. I was going to say thank you. Sorry, Jim. I was going to say okay. Thank you for chairing the committee in this session of the council.
Okay, thank you. Well, it's very kind of you. Right. So we're not quite in private session yet. I see the recording's being saved. Once that disappears, well. Thank you.